Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is Napoleon Bonaparte, Part 5, Emperor of the French and King of Italy. We stopped last time in 1801. Napoleon was dictator of France and bringing good government to France and to the countries of Europe, and really the whole world. On February 9th, the Peace of Luneville was established, ending 9 years of war with Austria. There was public relief in France. In March, there was a prospect of peace with Great Britain. March 23rd, the Russian Tsar Paul I was assassinated. This was a blow to Napoleon because his successor, the new Tsar Alexander, would be the greatest factor in the downfall of Napoleon years later. The Rothschild family continued to be the dominant financial players in Europe and a dominant behind-the-scenes political players. Sweden, Denmark, and Russia all signed peace treaties with Great Britain in 1801. On October 1st, France signed a peace treaty with Great Britain as well. Malta was returned to the Knights of St. John, and Egypt to the Ottoman Empire. In August, France had peace with Bavaria. At this time, France was at peace with Austria, Naples, Turkey, Russia, Great Britain, and the émigrés, those French people who had left during the French Revolution. Napoleon believed the dull masses would like an emperor more than a consul dictator. He believed in the principle of honor, merit, courage, and talent. Napoleon wanted the French people to vote regarding establishing him as emperor in a plebiscite, which was passed, because they did approve this. He was a popular dictator, and the common people liked the glamour of royalty, just like today. The people liked the British royal family, just the glamour, although Napoleon knew it didn't mean anything, but it was sort of entertaining if he would be the emperor of France. He believed also that the old nobility would support him more. The celebration of the storming of the Bastille was stopped, beginning of the French Revolution. So Napoleon proceeded to create a royal court. Since he would be the emperor, he called on experts from the Bourbon court. Marie Antoinette's lady-in-waiting was restored. He was serious about organizing a royal court, although he knew the vanity of same. He knew it was just sort of entertainment for the masses, that's what they wanted. He chose men who rose with him for this new court: Berthier, Murat, Lannes, Ney, and Davout. He had a royal hunt in which his mind wandered and the stag escaped. Napoleon's salary was 25 million francs per year, same as the late King Louis, although Louis overspent. He spent 45 million and Napoleon saved 12 million. Napoleon only spent 20 minutes eating dinner and did not notice his food. As we said, he returned the royal functionaries to the Tuileries. Etiquette was taught by Marie Antoinette's former First Lady of the Bedchamber. The trappings of royalty were returned. Napoleon was not a slave of anything. He was not particular about his room, the food, or lighting. What was indispensable to him was an open fire, a hot bath, eau de cologne, and a change of linen twice per day. Now, his wife Josephine was extravagant on clothes. His brothers and sisters also wasted money and were never satisfied. He gave wealth and honors to his siblings who were ungrateful and caused him much trouble. Why? Because he was a traditional man, and that meant loyalty to family. His brother Joseph mocked Napoleon to Napoleon's friends and enemies. Josephine's children, Eugene and Hortense, were loyal to Napoleon. They were grateful for what he had done for their mother and for them. In 1801, France sent a 12,000-man army to reestablish order in Saint-Domingue, currently the country of Haiti in the Caribbean, the western third of the island of Hispaniola. In the 1790s, Saint-Domingue, and that's in French and in Spanish Santo Domingo, the eastern part is Dominican Republic. In the 1790s, Saint-Domingue was a French colony. It had African slaves, and it produced 40% of Europe's sugar, 60% of Europe's coffee. So France was making a lot of money from Saint-Domingue. Of course, terrible suffering from the African slaves there working, cultivating sugar and coffee. And it was France's most valuable colony. However, because of the ideas of the French Revolution, which came there was a slave revolt. By 1801, Saint-Domingue had become an independent country after 6 years of rebellion led by Toussaint Louverture. So France lost its income in Saint-Domingue from coffee and sugar cultivation, which was an economic disaster for France. So Napoleon wanted to get that wealth back. So he sent the army, or a 12,000-man army, to do so. The army sent to Saint-Domingue was led by Charles Leclerc, who was married to Napoleon's sister Pauline. They arrived in Haiti in January of 1802, and they were going to bring back slavery. At that time, Haiti ruled the whole island, including the two-thirds eastern part, which was Spanish Santo Domingo, currently, today, Dominican Republic. However, malaria and yellow fever devastated the French army. There was brutal fighting between the French army and the Haitians in Saint-Domingue. Toussaint Louverture surrendered on May 1st. Under the agreement, there was freedom for the black people there. Louverture retired to his plantation. However, on June 7th, the French kidnapped Louverture and sent him to France, where he died in prison. Tragic, terrible, really criminal what they did. In 1803, General Leclerc died of yellow fever. 30,000 French soldiers died in Haiti, and ultimately they were defeated, and Haiti became an independent country, and Napoleon failed to get back Saint-Domingue and the income from sugar and coffee production. In 1802, in January, Napoleon's brother Louis married Josephine's daughter Hortense. This was arranged by Napoleon. It was an very unhappy marriage. March 25th, there was peace with Great Britain, rejoicing in France. 70,000 French prisoners in Great Britain were able to come home, and 5,000 Britons visited France, hoping to see Napoleon, who was very popular actually in Great Britain. He was very charming and popular, and the people, even though he'd been the enemy of their country, the people could see, the common people in Great Britain could see and knew that he was bringing good government to France and the European continent. There was great admiration in Great Britain for Napoleon because of his reforms, which the British people wanted. In May, the Senate voted to make him first consul for life. The French people supported that. There was a bad harvest in 1801, and Napoleon was worried about that food prices would go up. He built a stock of granaries. In July, the British evacuated Elba, and France annexed that island. September of 1802, the French sent a military tour to Tripoli, Alexandria, Cairo, Jaffa, and Acre in North Africa and the Middle East. Napoleon wanted the Valais region of Switzerland in order to cross the Alps. The Swiss refused. Napoleon said that the Swiss were impudent and pretentious. He sent General Ney to Switzerland with a small army to help install a pro-French government there. The Peace of Amiens gave France and Napoleon a chance for economic growth through state intervention. Napoleon was reading Adam Smith's book, The Wealth of Nations. Great Britain had advanced through industrialization, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the production of cloth through factories. Napoleon had limited success helping French catch up in the Industrial Revolution. British newspapers were calling for Napoleon's assassination. As a result, Napoleon banned British newspapers in France. 1803 February, Napoleon helped 200 German states become 40. This was a major step in the unification of Germany. On May 18th, Great Britain declared war on France. Napoleon decided to sell Louisiana to the U.S. to pay for the war. He was talking with his brothers Lucien and Joseph about it while in the bathtub. His brothers were against the sale. Napoleon stood up and then fell back in the bathtub, drenching Joseph with bath water in their argument. Anglo-Dutch moneys lent money to the U.S. to buy Louisiana. Napoleon referred to Great Britain as Carthage. He was always thinking of the Roman Empire, that he was the successor of the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire's great enemy was Carthage in North Africa. He studied Julius Caesar's invasion of Great Britain and wrote a letter to his wife Josephine, quote, "My life is made up of many sorrows. A sweet, agreeable home, free from all strain, can alone make me endure them." Regarding war with Great Britain, Napoleon said, quote, "We have 6 centuries of insults to avenge." As I said, the British were involved in a plot to murder Napoleon. Without Rothschild funding, the anti-French coalition would have been impossible. During the coalition wars against France, that were called the Napoleonic Wars, historian M.S. King wrote, quote, "Napoleon did not start this never-ending European war on France. He inherited it." In 1776, Adam Weishaupt formed the secret society Order of the Illuminati, financed by the Rothschilds. They plotted to overthrow governments, destroy Christianity. They planned to create a world communal state and a new world order. The Rothschild banking dynasty is the richest family business in the world. They had branches during Napoleon's time in Austria, Italy, France, and England. They lent money to the kings of Europe, financed both sides of European wars. The Rothschilds were the dominant force behind finance, globalism, environmentalism, and liberalism. Meyer M. Shell Rothschild was the godfather of the New World Order. Napoleon, after resting and recreation at home, would drive to Paris and say, quote, "Now I can put my head in the collar once more." Napoleon decided to plan a plot against himself to find his enemies. He arrested Moreau and was disappointed because he respected Moreau, and Moreau was exiled to the U.S. Pichegru, who was involved also, was strangled in prison. There were 13 executions, including the Duke of Enghien from the Bourbon family who was in the plot. The Duke was arrested in Ettenheim, Baden, in a raid across the Rhine River. March 25th, the Duke de Enghien was abducted by French dragoons in Ettenheim because he was involved in a plot to murder Napoleon, and de Enghien was executed. This hurt Napoleon's reputation. This Duke de Enghien was a Bourbon, but he was apparently popular, and they came into Baden to catch this guy. Now he was as I said, he was planning to become emperor of France. Back to that raid on the Duke de Enghien, 300 dragoons were involved. The Duke was executed. The Senate requested that Napoleon establish a monarchy. He decided to become emperor rather than a king because the name king had such a bad connotation. It appealed to his imagination because, again, the Roman Empire was something on his mind. He decided that the title emperor would be better than king. He believed that if he became emperor, he would have greater influence because of the glamour of the throne. He created an elite corps of the Imperial Guard. The decision was made in 1804 that his coronation would be held in Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. His symbols were the eagle and the bee because of the reputation bees have for being busy. He created a Legion of Honor. Soldiers would receive prizes, medals, and promotions, pension, and recognition from Napoleon. Napoleon said that the French loved honor and distinction. Now, Pope Pius was summoned to come for this ceremony, for Napoleon's coronation, and he insisted on a church wedding for Napoleon and Josephine before the coronation. They had gotten married when the churches were all closed. They had not had a church wedding. So that was done on December 2nd before the coronation. Napoleon arrived at Notre Dame wearing he had an imitation of Charlemagne's scepter. Paris was in a fever of excitement for this event. The Pope was in Notre Dame, seated when Napoleon arrived, and Napoleon famously seized the crown, turned his back on the Pope, and crowned himself and Josephine. So this was a big deal. December 2nd, 1804, Napoleon and Josephine coronated at Notre Dame. It was called a magnificent spectacle. Napoleon said to his brother Joseph, quote, "If only Daddy could see us now." There were two crowns during the coronation that Napoleon wore. He wore a golden laurel wreath that he wore when he entered the cathedral, and then he put on top of that a replica of Charlemagne's crown, the famous Holy Roman Emperor. The Austrians would not lend the original crown of Charlemagne. Napoleon's crowning of himself was the ultimate act of a self-made man. It's depicted in the painting by Jacques-Louis David. That evening, there were massive fireworks in Paris, cash distributions, the public fountains flowed with wine. Napoleon's mother said, quote, let's hope that it lasts." Napoleon's brother Louis loved poetry. He was chief of the Imperial Guard. Murat and Caroline were extravagant. Napoleon was unable to cut off his family. His mother was in Rome and was summoned to Paris for the coronation, but she was delayed and was late, didn't make it in time for the coronation of her son. He had summoned the Pope to Rome for this. When the Pope arrived, Napoleon did not kneel or kiss his hand. As we said, he had these crown of golden laurel leaves, which resembled those of the Roman Emperor Augustus. After the ceremony, Napoleon was relieved it was over. He was jealous of Alexander the Great, who declared himself son of the Father Eternal, whom all believed this declaration except Aristotle and other philosophers in ancient Greece. Again, Napoleon felt the allure of Asia and global conquest. In 1805, Napoleon traveled to Milan, where he was crowned himself, again, with the Iron Cross of the Lombards. This is ceremony when he became King of Italy. This was in the tradition of the Carlovingian kings. Napoleon was tied to two great intriguers, Fouché and Talleyrand. He hated them both, but needed them both as well. As emperor, he lost support from the champions of freedom, including Byron and Beethoven. March of 1805, again, he became King of Italy, or had that ceremony, the coronation at the Milan Duomo. In May, there were 30,000 people who came. The Iron Crown of Lombardy, worn by every Holy Roman Emperor since Frederick Barbarossa in 1155. A few days after the coronation, in 1804 at Notre Dame, there was a ceremony where army colonels received eagle standards. These were bronze eagles that weighed 3.5 pounds, mounted on blue oaken wooden staffs. Napoleon said, quote, "The loss of an eagle is an affront to regimental honor, for which neither victory nor the glory acquired on 100 battlefields can make amends." Yeah, so these eagle standards were for morale and esprit de corps, and to motivate the soldiers to fight well in battles. Napoleon, as dictator, used his power to promote meritocracy, equality under the law, and liberty in France and the territories conquered. After defeating the coalition countries in the wars that were forced on France. He was not interested in democracy. He knew the ignorance of the masses and the corruption of political leaders. Napoleon said regarding the legal profession, "This heap of chatterboxes and revolution fomenters who are inspired only by crime and corruption." Napoleon gave an order to General Marmont, who was training for the French invasion of Great Britain in 1804, and said, quote, "Pay great attention to the soldiers. Spend 8 hours at a stretch, seeing the soldiers one by one. Receive their complaints and make sure they lack nothing." This was important in raising morale, which was so important in winning these difficult battles. December of 1804, British had an alliance with Sweden. In April 1805, Great Britain had an alliance with Russia, and the core of the Third Coalition was in place. The British and Rothschild money were paying Russians. They were always paying these other countries to fight France. Napoleon called the British a nation of shopkeepers. So again, British financial support was key in getting the enemies of France to fight France. The British were fueled by the profits from the Industrial Revolution and Rothschild money. July of 1805, Napoleon hoped to begin his invasion of Great Britain. In August, he declared dancing near churches should not be forbidden and said, quote, "Dancing is an evil. If everything the bishop said was to be believed, then balls, plays, and fashions would be forbidden, and the empire turned into one great convent." September of 1805, the French army marched east to fight Austria, and the invasion of Great Britain was canceled. The demi-brigades knew 80 songs by heart. These were marching songs to keep up the morale. Musicians doubled as stretcher-bearers and orderlies during battles. Napoleon would like to take he could take a 10-minute nap and be energized for hours. The French defeated the Austrians at Ulm. This was a major victory. Napoleon said that the war was unnecessary. The British had bribed Vienna to protect London from capture because they were planning an invasion of Great Britain. Napoleon called the Russians and Austrians British lapdogs. October of 1805, Cape Trafalgar, 50 miles west of Cadiz, Spain, in the ocean, the British defeated the French-Spanish fleet. 33 ships were destroyed. The British victory led to 100 years of British global naval dominance. Napoleon was master of the land in Europe, but the British were masters of the sea. In the war with Austria, Napoleon entered Vienna and occupied the Habsburg Palace there. As we said, the Russian Tsar Paul had been murdered. His son Alexander became a strong ally of Great Britain. The anti-Napoleon coalition was developing. The British strengthened their navy. Napoleon was ignorant about ships. He decided to start a trade war with Great Britain and close European ports to English ships. Ultimately, this was a mistake because it hurt the people in Europe economically and reduced morale in Europe. Napoleon ordered a naval review during a storm. Admiral Bruix, B-R-U-I-X, refused the order, said it was dangerous because of the storm. Napoleon ordered Bruix into exile and repeated the order. 200 men drowned. So this was a terrible error, terrible thing that Napoleon did here. And it showed that in this case, his self-confidence, he thought he could do anything, but he couldn't do anything. There were limits, and this is one example of that. Napoleon wanted to make Persia an ally. He wanted peace with England, but failed, and France was at war again. Napoleon for years focused on Alexander the Great. Now he focused on Charlemagne and visited his tomb at Aix-la-Chapelle. Napoleon wanted to unite Europe. As emperor, he would be emperor of Europe and his brothers kings of the various countries in Europe. So this war with Austria came. A victory was achieved at Ulm without a shot. The Austrians were surrounded, and Napoleon used forced marches to get into position. He ended up having wet clothes for a week, and his feet were cold. He wrote to Josephine about that. As he said, in Trafalgar, the English destroyed the French fleet. Napoleon continued his dreams of being emperor of Asia. The French achieved victory against the Austrians at Austerlitz, which led to peace. The Russians and Austrians planned to trap Napoleon between them. Napoleon interacted with soldiers. That raised their morale. It was inconceivable for most Allied generals to do something like that because they were elite. That's why the French army always had better morale among the troops, because they knew that Napoleon cared about them, because he interacted with them. December 2nd, 1805 was the Battle of Austerlitz, which is now in the Czech Republic. Russian troops were on a frozen lake, and the French fired on the ice, which led to Russians drowning. The Austerlitz victory was major. The Russians were defeated. They'd been backed by British gold, Rothschild money. The Austrian nerve was broken. This was the greatest victory of Napoleon's career. He met the Austrian Emperor Francis, who wanted peace. Talleyrand advised Napoleon to make Austria an ally. Napoleon rejected that because he believed Austria would always be bellicose and resentful. He would never be able to subdue nor reconcile with them. He forgot that opinion later when he married into the Habsburg family, which didn't work out. After Austerlitz, Napoleon said that every widow of a soldier killed in that battle at Austerlitz would receive 200 francs per year for life. There was financial confidence in France. Napoleon was bitter about bankers and their funding these never-ending wars against him and good government. On December 22, 1805 was the end of the War of the Third Coalition against France. After the victory at Austerlitz, Napoleon commissioned building the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, which was a major tourist attraction to commemorate that victory. Still very, very popular today, the Arc de Triomphe. Napoleon met the Austrian Emperor Francis. Napoleon wanted to create a United States of Europe and to unify Europe. Joseph was named King of Naples. The Confederation of the Rhine was created. 13 German states united. This was the beginning of modern Germany. Napoleon's brother Louis became King of Holland. His brother Jerome was a sailor in the United States who was married with a child. And another mistake Napoleon made. He pressured Jerome to divorce his wife and come to Europe so he could be one of the kings of Europe. Napoleon's brother Joseph as King of Naples and Louis of King of Holland, they were both poor kings. This was definitely bad ideas Napoleon had. He wasn't perfect. And having his brothers being kings of areas of Europe was a bad idea, because it contradicted his idea of meritocracy. They didn't deserve this, because they were just his brothers. That didn't mean they're qualified to serve as kings in Europe. April 20th, 1806, Napoleon had a proclamation of support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. He said that Judaism was one of France's 3 official religions and said, quote, "I want all people living in France to be equal citizens and benefit from our laws." Letizia, Napoleon's mother, always feared that her son Napoleon would die on the battlefield. She was very thrifty with the money Napoleon gave her. Letizia wanted Ajaccio to be the capital of Corsica, not Corte, so Napoleon made the change. In Napoleon's study in his office, he had a bust of Frederick the Great, the famous Prussian king. Again, Napoleon created the Confederation of the Rhine. This promoted German nationalism and the dream of a united, independent Germany. Prussia declared war on France in 1806. October 13th, Napoleon was riding through Jena and was spotted by the philosopher George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, who said, quote, "Truly it is a remarkable sensation to see such an individual on horseback, raising his arm over the world and ruling it." Again, the Confederation of the Rhine was the start of German unification. It included all the German areas except for Austria and Prussia, the 2 other major German-speaking places. October 14th, 1806, the Battle of Jena. French achieved victory. On October 25th, Napoleon made a triumphant entry into Berlin. Napoleon said, quote, "The first qualification of a soldier is fortitude under fatigue and privation. Courage is only the second. Hardship, poverty, and want are the best school for a soldier." The fall of Berlin was so quick that the shopkeepers did not have time to remove satirical caricatures of Napoleon from their windows. Napoleon removed the quadriga and winged victory chariot from the Brandenburg Gate, which he took to Paris. At Potsdam, he saw Frederick the Great's sword, belt, and sash, which he sent to Paris. He visited Frederick the Great's tomb and said, quote, "Hats off, gentlemen. If this man were alive, I would not be standing here." Again, his respect for great men in history. Napoleon wrote a letter to his wife Josephine that he was going to bed at 8 p.m. and rising at midnight. French achieved victories at Jena and Auerstedt. There were 20,000 Prussian prisoners. He took the sword of Frederick the Great as a trophy. He closed the harbors of Europe to England. He had a treaty with Russia and Austria. The question of Poland remained, Poland's status, which was occupied by Russia and Austria. October 27th, he entered Berlin. There was a grand procession of 20,000 grenadiers and cuirassiers Napoleon rode 20 paces ahead of his soldiers. He could have been shot by a rifle from any of the windows, but he was popular. That didn't happen. He settled in Frederick William's Rococo Charlottenburg Palace in Berlin. Poland did not exist as a country at that time. There was strong Polish nationalism. There were 30,000 Polish troops in the French army in the Italian campaigns, and Napoleon was sympathetic to the Polish cause. There were Polish legions in the French army from 1797 to 1803. France's enemies, Prussia, Austria, and Russia, were also Poland's conquerors, and the Poles saw in Napoleon their champion. And in 1806, he established the independent Grand Duchy of Warsaw, and that was a step toward Polish independence. November 11th was the Berlin Decree, the Continental System, blockade of all trade with Europe with Great Britain. Again, a major mistake. It just hurt the economy of Europe and reduced his popularity. He also needed to buy uniforms for the French army from Great Britain, and the blockade hurt the British economy and everyone's economy. In Europe, there was much smuggling. 1802, they were trying to get the French to consume beet sugar. The French did not like Swiss tea or drinking chicory over coffee. On November 25th, Napoleon left Berlin to tour the Russian front. He teased his doctor, Jean-Nicolas Corvisant, quote, Here you are, you great charlatan. Did you kill a lot of people today? Well, that concludes today's presentation. We'll continue next time with part 6 of the fascinating life of Napoleon Bonaparte. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.